Hey friends, before we get started, I wanted to let you guys know about our Seeds of Hope campaign that we are running right now. Seeds of Hope is just such a great way to show support and love for either yourself or a friend or family member who is going through a cancer diagnosis, or surprise mom because Mother's Day is coming up and you want to send her some seeds. So this year, if you donate $65 to survivingbreastcancer.org, we will send you a beautifully curated package of seeds. You can find out more about the program at survivingbreastcancer.org/seeds of hope. So check it out. Thank you so much. Hello, and welcome to Breast Cancer Conversations, a podcast brought to you by survivingbreastcancer.org. I am Laura Carfang, breast cancer survivor and founder of survivingbreastcancer.org, a nonprofit organization providing community, education, and resources to empower those diagnosed with breast cancer and their caregivers from day one and beyond. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Breast Cancer Conversations. Today, I am speaking with Annick. Annick was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer after learning that the cancer had already spread to her liver. In this conversation, Annick shares what it's like to receive the news through scans, appointments, and MyChart messages, and how isolating and overwhelming it can feel when the words metastatic breast cancer are not clearly explained. Annick walks us through her treatment experiences, including targeted therapy, chemotherapy, a clinical trial attempt, Enhertu, and now Xeloda. She speaks about the fatigue, changes in taste, hydration challenges, neuropathy, and the emotional weight of continuing treatment while asking the hard questions about managing quality of life. Annick reminds us that metastatic breast cancer is not a straight line. Plans change, treatment works until it doesn't, hope and fear can exist at the same time, and sometimes the most important thing we can ask our care team is, let's take a step back and look at the full picture. Welcome to the conversation. Hello, I'm so excited to be speaking with you today, Annick, to hear your story and experience being diagnosed with breast cancer, and then also your experience navigating the various treatments. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Would you like to introduce yourself, where you're calling from, and a little bit about your breast cancer diagnosis?
Sure. So I'm Annick. I'm originally from Belgium, but I've been living in the States for 26 years now. I'm in Burlington, Vermont. I was diagnosed 3 years ago. I was de novo metastatic breast cancer, which means that at the time of diagnostic, I was already stage 4. And I remember just, first time Googling metastatic breast cancer, and it says it's incurable. So the emotional roller coaster from the beginning. So 3 years in, currently on my 4th and 5th lines of treatment, I've discovered, to hear stories of people who live years and years on one line of treatment or who've been dealing with this diagnosis for so long. Then I found myself progressing pretty quickly. At my 1-year anniversary, I was already starting my 3rd line of treatment. So it's been a scary, I don't like the word journey, a scary path.
Oh, definitely a scary path. And, when we think about being diagnosed metastatic de novo, I think that brings on its own set of unique circumstances. I was under the misbelief that when you were diagnosed with cancer, you always start at 0 or 1, and then you become 2 or 3 before 4. And, that actually is totally incorrect, right? And so people can be diagnosed at any stage, and especially with metastatic and, advanced disease. Can I ask how you were initially diagnosed? How did you find out?
I had felt something in my breast for actually quite a while. I think that I had felt it for about a year when I finally consulted. But that year I was in a deep burnout at work. And so just the idea, I had never been sick before. So just the idea of making a medical appointment, it was a little bit too much, even though at some point I realized I cannot wait much longer. But then by the time I contacted my PCP to have an appointment, it took a while before these appointments came, in my calendar. So the very first visit, very first mammogram and echo, is that echo?
The mammogram or the echo when they're looking at your heart, I believe?
No, what is the word? I'm sorry, that's the chemo brain.
No, that's okay.
But anyway, the first two diagnostic tools showed that, yes.
Ultrasound? Was it the ultrasound?
Ultrasound, thank you. Showed that I had two cysts actually in my breast.
Mm.
And one, even though I know where it is now, we've never been able to feel that one. So I was immediately scheduled with a surgeon who told me, you have the most common type of breast cancer. It was invasive ductal. I was estrogen positive, progesterone negative, and at the time HER2 negative, which later changed to 1, which is considered low. So I was immediately scheduled for surgery. They were going to remove my breast and remove 2 layers of lymph nodes because was already cancer in the lymph nodes. I was already scheduled also, and I met with a PT to talk about lymphedema, get me prepared for all that, get education on all that. But the surgeon said, because it's already in your lymph nodes and because you have felt that for a while, let's do more tests, more scans to make sure that it hasn't spread anywhere else. Because if it has, then we will not do the surgery. So I had a scan followed by an MRI because the first scan showed that, yes, there is something in the liver. So we did an MRI that confirmed that there are lesions in my liver, only in my liver. I had nowhere else. Then surgery was canceled. All that happened through my chart. Never talked with a real person. Surgery canceled. Next appointment was with an oncologist who never told me, never used the word metastatic breast cancer. Never explain exactly what it is. I find it all through my chart and through Googling.
My goodness.
And so he also scheduled a biopsy to make sure that what was in my liver was breast cancer and not another type of cancer. So it took me between the beginning of February until mid-March to finally have the final confirmation that it was MBC. That was a long, scary process. And so I started on targeted therapy for the estrogens positive. And that oncologist, I fired him after a few months because we were not matching at all. He was a fellow and didn't have a lot of experience and no empathy or anything. He kept telling me, women live decades on this medication, you're going to do fine. Except that first line of treatment lasted only 11 months for me. I remember also being really depressed, like, everybody going through that diagnosis the first year. But my first visit after 3 months with him, when I was telling him that my sleep was completely destroyed, he asked me, first he asked me at what time I was taking my medication. And I told him, I don't think that is related to medication. It's more stress. And he said, has something happened in your life in the last few months? And I said, yeah, I've been diagnosed with MBC. So it was not a good match at all. But first line, I was still working. When I had progression, though, I took short-term disability. Second progression, I took short-term disability again that I let go into long-term disability, because the emotional roller coaster and the fatigue, and also seeing that I was progressing quickly, I'm thinking, if my years are counted, I don't want to spend my last few years working. Yeah. So I remember at the beginning of the diagnosis, I was wondering, when do you decide to stop working? The answer came naturally, with the progression.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this. And I'm glad that you fired your first doctor.
Yeah.
But when we don't know what we're supposed to expect, right? Like, we expect there to be empathy, to be having bedside manner, for there to be communication. So not only in this day and age where we are reading everything through my chart and the portals and everything, that there needs to be follow-up and a communication and opportunities for us as patients to ask all of these questions, because this is the first time we're hearing the information. This is the first time we're learning the vocabulary. So what was going through your head? You mentioned, just depression, stress, not being able to get a good night's sleep. When you found out that you were metastatic and the surgery was canceled and then more tests were being ordered, what were you able to reach out to any family or friends, or were you more internal and closed about it? What was the state?
The first reaction is, I'm going to die. I remember talking with my son. My son is now 27. He understood also what the diagnosis meant. And we hugged each other and thinking, okay, we need to travel or do something because I'm going to die soon. Like, you don't know how long you have. Pretty early on, I felt the need to connect with people who were going through the same thing. I wanted to hear experiences, but I also wanted to be able to talk with people who would understand what I was going through.
Yes.
So the good timing is there is the Living Beyond Breast Cancer conference in April. And since I was diagnosed, by mid-March, I knew my diagnosis and I'd learned somehow about that conference. And I was waiting. Do I register or not? Do I have the diagnosis or not? So as soon as I was diagnosed, I signed up for that conference.
It's amazing.
And that was a great experience to hear other people going through this. And also, I remember I attended remotely and I had so many bookmarks because, they were talking about surviving breast cancer and Project Life and all those groups. And I bookmarked everything. So it was a little bit too much information at once because it was just the beginning. But then in the next few months, I started cleaning up the bookmarks and figuring out where I could find my support. So through Project Life, I had a mentor. I attended healing circles. So finding my family, people who understand exactly what's going on. And when they say, I'm sorry, you feel it. That somebody else say, I'm sorry, it feels sometimes empty. But people who know exactly what you're going through, that was the best support.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned that you were progressing through the various therapies quite rapidly. So what are some of the examples of lines of treatment that you were on?
So my first one was targeted therapy. It was Verzenio and letrozole. So I stayed kind of stable throughout those 11 months, but at 11 months I had progression. Then I went to Afinitor and Faslodex, the injections. That lasted only 2 months, and I developed pneumonitis also with those. Then I went for a second opinion in Boston at Dana-Farber, and both that oncologist and mine were saying that for my kind of cancer, progressing quickly, that sometimes chemo is a better option than targeted therapy. So I went on Taxol and a few infusion in. I was switched to Abraxane, and that lasted about 10 months with a cool little episode. Just after 3 months of Abraxane, my first scan was showing no evidence of active disease, which was incredible.
Incredible news.
But the next scan 3 months later, there was progression again. So I learned not to believe too quickly that things are stable and are going to last. The good thing, by that time, I had another oncologist who was awesome. I felt like we were forming really a team, like she was listening to me. So when I had that progression at the second scan, my first 3 months on Abraxane was infusion every week. Then when the first scan was good, she switched me to every 3 weeks. Then when I had progression and we were talking about next line of treatment, I asked her, how do we know exactly that it's the chemo that's not working or because we changed the frequency of infusion? And she told me, I think it's the chemo not working. And I asked her, can I go back to weekly? And she said, I will let you try. I don't think it's going to work. So we're going to scan you in 2 months instead of 3. I don't want to let you go too long without a scan. She asked me to reach out to my second opinion doctor who said the same thing. You can try. It's not going to work. Don't wait too long for a scan. That next scan was stable.
Really? Wow.
And so I was happy that they would let me try something even though they didn't really believe in it. So that, bought me a few months.
Yeah, that kept you on that same treatment plan for a little bit longer.
Yes. And then the next scan after that, there was progression. And at that time, I reached out for a clinical trial.
Was the progression always in your liver or was there progression
Yes.
elsewhere, always in the liver? I want to take a quick moment and tell you something I'm really excited about. You can now download the survivingbreastcancer.org app directly from the App Store or Google Play. Just search for survivingbreastcancer.org. It is completely free to download, and inside you will have access to all of our support groups, educational programs and webinars, all of our blog content and articles, podcast episodes, and community features to connect with others who understand what you're going through. Everything in one place, because navigating breast cancer shouldn't require 15 open browser tabs. Download the app today.
Yeah. So far, it stays in my liver. It doesn't go anywhere else. Same thing also, very cool oncologist. I think that's so important that you have, an oncologist that really matches you.
Mm-hmm.
because she had told me from the beginning, if you're ever anxious about anything, if there's any test that can reassure you, let me know. And so because of all the progression, I know that with the PET scan, we were checking kind of everything except the brain. And that was a big fear of mine. So I asked her, how do we know that it's not going in my brain? Like I don't have symptoms, but I didn't have any symptoms in my liver either.
Right.
And so she said, we could do an MRI of your brain, but you need to tell me if you have headaches, because that's kind of the condition. And I said, sure, I have headaches. She was fine getting me the MRI, and that MRI was fine.
That's great. Yes, to have reassurance, because it's frustrating when, we want to do scans and see if the cancer had progressed and to what extent. But then a lot of it too is almost reactive until you have a symptom that promotes getting those types of tests.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you decide to start looking for a clinical trial? Was this something that was brought up from your oncologist, or was just through your own knowledge and research?
So that new oncologist, she was not shy about ordering tests and scans and all that. So with her, we started doing liquid biopsies. So Tempus carries that kind of test. And I think it's Tempus that showed that some of my mutation were linking me to some clinical trials. So I have TP53 mutation. I heard of that in my first year. But when I read about the trial was the TIL treatment, tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes. It's a treatment that is approved for melanoma, so skin cancer, but it's still in clinical trial for other types of cancers. In my first year, when I read about that trial, the whole protocol, it is super scary. It's a very tough treatment. So at that point, I said, no, thank you. I'm not ready for that. When Abraxane stopped working, we thought about that treatment, a clinical trial again, thinking this might be a good timing to do it. With my oncologist, we always talk about the next line of treatment for whenever my treatment is going to stop. So I knew that my next line would be either Enhertu or capecitabine Xeloda. And I was scared of both of those.
And this
really
is after
scared.
the clinical trial?
No, it was when I was on Abraxane. We knew about that. So we were thinking the clinical trial would be a good thing to do now, because if I go on Enhertu, I may not feel as strong, after that line of treatment stops. So she thought that it was a good timing, that I was strong enough to try and go through that clinical trial. So that was at the NIH in the DC area. So I went through the screening. The first step for that treatment is a surgery where they remove a tumor and they harvest your lymphocytes from that tumor. Then in the lab, they grow those lymphocytes to the number that they need, and they test them with your very specific type of cancer to see if those lymphocytes, it's kind of an immunotherapy treatment. So they check that your lymphocytes recognize and attack your specific cancer. And then they boost those cells. So that takes a few months in the lab. And then the treatment itself, you spend a month in the hospital there. First week is high dose chemo to deplete your immune system. Then they give you back your lymphocytes. And then they add some infusion of interleukin-2, IL-2, to kind of boost your lymphocytes. So all I had read, I joined a group on Facebook about that specific treatment. It is brutal. So it was very scary, but I qualified for it. I went through the screening. I went through the surgery. They said that they were able to get good lymphocytes. I needed to be 1 month off treatment before the surgery. So after the Abraxane, I stayed 1 month. After that, I told my oncologist I would like to stay off treatment as long as possible to get as close as possible to the treatment, because I want to get strong enough and in the best shape possible.
Mm-hmm.
So she was letting me, we were keeping track of my tumor markers, because she said, if something goes wrong, like we want to scan you and make sure we don't wait too long.
Right.
Around the fourth, I was told that my lymphocytes were growing well in the lab, but then when they tested them, they would not recognize and attack my cancer. So they were not able to create the treatment for me. So that stopped there.
Wow.
So that was about 4 months. And I must say that I've been on a couple of those vacations from treatment. Those are my best times when, you feel you're getting a little bit stronger. You don't have all the side effects. So I enjoyed those 4 months, but it was a huge emotional toll when I was told that I cannot go through that treatment.
Right, because you're enjoying kind of this treatment holiday, knowing what it's like to not be on treatment, but knowing that there was going to be, unfortunately, this really brutal regimen that you were going to be embarking on that was hopefully going to attack your cancer cells. And so,
and you always have all the emotions together. So I was scared about that clinical trial, but there was hope. It was an additional line of treatment that was opening for me that they cannot offer me, in approved treatments right now.
Did they understand why the lymphocytes weren't responding? Was there any more information that they could research?
No. And I'm wondering, if it's that mutation, the TP53, because I'm not sure that I explained clearly, but it's something that you have in you that repairs DNA. So when cancer cells go crazy, you have something that's supposed to repair the DNA and slow down those cancer cells from growing. The TP53 mutation is a loss of function. That means that my cancer cell can go crazy, they're not being stopped.
I see. Yeah.
At the same time, a few months later, reading more about that clinical trial and hearing people going through it seems so brutal that I'm thinking maybe it was a good thing that I didn't have to go through that. Who knows how it could have turned out? Mm-hmm. So, you try to be positive in everything that happens.
Yeah. And the technology to even test the tumor in the cells in advance before even receiving the treatment. So it's not like you had to receive it to only find out that it wasn't working. So
right.
I understand the disappointment, but at the same time, you're almost getting the information and the answers in advance of having to go through it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So at this point now you're back to your oncologist of clinical trial is out. You've been on this holiday for 4 months. What's the next step?
So we did a scan at that time because also my tumor markers were going up steadily during those 4 months. So I had a significant progression at that time. My oncologist were very matter of fact. She says, you have progression. We knew it was going to happen, which she is right. But she said, we also had talked about a plan. So now let's put that plan in place. So before going through that clinical trial, the first step, she had told me my next line would be Enhertu or capecitabine. And she said, you have the choice which one you want to start first. You start with one and we have the other one as the next line. So it's not like you have to choose and then there's only one available. So both were available. I have to choose which one to start with. At first she was telling me I would have the choice, but because my progression was significant at the time, she still gave me the choice, but she was recommending going with Enhertu, that it was a little bit more potent and she wanted to stop that progression as quickly as possible. So then was the fear of, okay, Enhertu is here. We have to try it.
Yes. And for those who are maybe not familiar with Enhertu, can you describe what type of drug it is? What was the regimen like? How often you had to receive it?
So it's an IV chemo, and I'm blanking on what type of treatment it is.
But you received it through IV?
It's IV. It's once every 3 weeks.
Okay.
I qualified for that one because I'm HER2 2. Mm-hmm. HER2 low, I'm sorry. So that is surrounded by something that looks for the HER2. So it goes more towards where HER2 is, and then it releases the chemo into those cells.
Okay.
There are bad side effects with that one. Some of the scarier one, you may have lung or heart issues on top of all the regular side effects, the fatigue, the nausea, the taste, all that. I was mentioning earlier, like anytime my oncologist mentioned a treatment, I go on Facebook because there are groups for all different types of treatments. For me, I like to hear the whole range of experiences, because some people say that Enhertu is the easiest treatment they've ever had and they've been on it for 2 years, which I'm amazed and happy for those people. And some others, it's a really bad treatment. They're really sick.
Yes.
So, you have the fear, but you have the hope that stays there all the time. And then when the time is there to start a treatment, for me, it's like, okay, now I go in and I'll take the time to see what that treatment is like for me. For me, it was a horrible experience. It looks like every treatment I've gone through, fatigue is the first thing that always hits me pretty hard. And Enhertu, after the first infusion, I was in my couch for most days. You hear also with the mechanism of Enhertu, there's kind of a chart timeline of those 3 weeks. By the time it finds the HER2 things and releasing. So for some people you will hear, they will say maybe day 6 to 9 of the 21-day cycle is their worst days. And after that, they get better. My experience on Enhertu, my whole 21 days were horrible. Fatigue was really hard. I've never had any nausea, but my digestive system completely off.
Really?
My sense of taste was off. Everything, well, lots of food would taste weird or off or not appetizing at all. And I was feeling, it's hard to explain, but I was feeling like heavy in my chest, but full all the time. So it was hard to even, and not thirsty. So it was hard to stay hydrated and nourished, which I had read in the groups, the importance of staying hydrated. That was helping a lot of people. So it was hard for me with the fatigue and the feeling sick and not thirsty, not hungry. It was hard to just get out of the couch and get something to drink. And I would drink, a couple of sips of water and I would feel so full and burpy. And
Yeah.
the good thing for me, it never got bad enough that I had to go to the ER for dehydration. But there were only a few things that were okay. Like I had found a protein drink that was working for me, Gatorade, rice pudding, really bland things. The taste is sweet was okay, but other tastes like regular foods, even blend foods, were hard to.
It's hard to keep up your energy and when
Yeah.
you have no desire and when you feel full all the time or you have those GI issues and you're feeling bloated or gassy and just uncomfortable. Why would you want to eat and drink even though you know that it's going to be helpful for you?
Yeah. And for me, it was hard. It was lasting the full 21 days, sometimes 1 or 2 days before the next infusion. I was perking up a little, but it was just to go back to the
You were like
infusion center.
you never had relief.
No break. Yeah. So that was the first treatment where I found myself quite a few days saying that this is not a life. And it's the first time that I was thinking of quality of life issue might be a reason why you stop a treatment. At the same time, I didn't want to say it out loud because I don't want that to happen. Like I wanted to continue. And also because I'm not ready to give up on treatment. Like after Enhertu and capecitabine, I'm not sure that I have a lot of different options open to me. So I'm not going to abandon the treatment as miserable as I feel. Also in those Facebook group, I had seen some people who were saying that their experience was really bad for a few cycles. And then they were finding the right dosage. They could do dose reduction, or they were finding the right combination of medication for their side effects, and it became more tolerable. So I was thinking I'll try and find my own solution in there. The thing I didn't understand, my oncologist was reducing my dose, but not the regular chart that has been approved for dose reduction. She was going really, really slowly. So, she was giving me hope by, okay, let's reduce your dose, but it was reduced by so little that I'm not sure how long it was going to take before I would feel the difference. But also, and also one interesting thing, I think a reason why it's important for us to be really educated is the importance of hydration. So I had read in those groups that some people after the infusion, a few days after the infusion, they would go back to the hospital to get IV hydration. And that was helping them. When I brought that up with my oncologist, she seemed to know, she seemed to agree with it and was ready to have me try that, but she never brought it up on her own. So I found that interesting that it's something that seems to work for lots of people. They seem aware of it, but I don't understand why it was not brought up by her, even though I never
to ask for it. Then were you able to get hydration infusions?
So I never got there. The first time I asked, she told me, yes, we can do it, but I'm not going to schedule you. Next week, when you feel you need it, call us and we'll get you in. But next week, by the time I felt like I need it, it's like, I don't even have the energy. to go to the kitchen. So let alone, call the hospital. Imagine that I need to get dressed and in my car and go there. And, there's also that notion of medical PTSD or medical trauma. For me, going to the hospital right now, going to the infusion center it's emotional. Like, it happens regularly that I'm driving there, I'm crying in my car saying, I don't want to go. I'm going, but I don't want to go.
I know.
It's all that weight. So the next time I told her, can we schedule it? Because I'm not going to call. And so they were going to schedule it. Apparently the message didn't get to the scheduler. So the next time I was going to insist and say, okay, let's sure that it's happening. But by that time, because there are known lung issues with Enhertu, every 3 months they were going to schedule me for a chest scan. And that one showed that I had mild pneumonitis. So it's a chemo-induced inflammation of the lungs. So the good thing is because it was mild, the protocol is to stop the infusion for a while to treat the pneumonitis with steroids and antibiotics. And when the lungs are healed, then you can go back. If the pneumonitis is discovered too far, when it's more severe, then it may be an indication to stop. So for me, it was discovered early enough. So we rescanned a month later. Pneumonitis was getting better, but not clear enough to go back on Enhertu yet. But the scan showed that there was progression in my liver.
Because you stopped, because you had to support the lung.
Yes.
Okay.
So she said, let's stay off Enhertu to give more time for your lungs to heal, but we cannot leave you without a treatment. So we started capecitabine, Xeloda. So at that time, I had 6 infusions of Enhertu. And so I started the capecitabine. That's an oral chemo. So that's pills that you take morning and evening. I'm on that for now. I'm at my 5th cycle of capecitabine, much more manageable. Scary part that you hear lots of people talk about is the hand and foot syndrome, where people may have the skin peeling or pain, or it sounds like for people who have that, it's extremely debilitating.
Yes.
The funny thing for me, like I was on a break about 2 months between Enhertu and capecitabine, and I had developed mild neuropathy from the Abraxane, but at the very tip of my fingers, nothing really too annoying. But in my break before starting the capecitabine, that neuropathy got a little bit worse. I got a lot of pain in my joints in my hands, and my hands are much weaker. Like I don't have the same strength to grip things. But that started before the capecitabine. So now on capecitabine, it comes and goes. So is it made worse by the capecitabine or not? My hand and feet were very dry, but so far, knock on wood, so far, so good. It's manageable.
And so you were saying with the Xeloda capecitabine that you're taking pills in the morning and the evenings. Is that like a 2-week on, 1-week off type of schedule that you're on?
The starting frequency is 2 weeks on, 1 week off. And then after 2 cycles, my bilirubin got a little bit high. So I was told to hold off another week. Then I hold off actually 3 weeks because I had a PET scan that was my regular PET scan that was coming on. And I wanted to wait that because I didn't know then after the scan, do I go back on the Enhertu or do I continue the capecitabine? That was also anxiety, not knowing where I'm at exactly. I forgot what your question was. So at that time, we changed the frequency 1 week on, 1 week off, which I also found that emotionally, I liked that change because when you take those pills, they tell you to eat 20 minutes before taking them. I'm not an early morning breakfast eater. So I was always there. I need to eat something. I need to take my pills not too late in the morning because you have to have about 12 hours in between. But 1 week of pills goes fast. And then you have 1 week of rest, of not thinking about it. So that's more manageable. And my side effects are not too bad. The fatigue is still there, but that's the main thing.
And how do you manage fatigue? For someone who's like listening and goes through fatigue, I know when I was going through active treatment, the fatigue was real. I remember literally getting from the bed to the couch to the bed was like, that's all I could do. I was exhausted and needed to take breaks and sit down and lie down.
Yeah. I've learned to listen to it and just give in. sometimes in the morning, wake up, go take my shower, and then I crash in the couch. And it takes a couple of hours before I get back up to eat breakfast.
Yeah. And how's your quality of life now? You were talking about kind of these like dire moments of, this is no way to live and you want to stay on treatments and, live the best life possible. So how do you reconcile all of these treatments, knowing that you are progressing through lines of treatment rapidly? It's only in the liver, which has been good, but you're kind of dealing with these ups and downs and these roller coasters over the last 3 years. How are you managing quality of life among all of this?
For me, it's one day at a time and feeling all the feels. For me, it's important to be able to feel all the feels. And I know I may start crying, randomly throughout the day, but then 2 minutes later, I'm going to enjoy the moment. I'm going to enjoy a conversation with my son. It's like taking the day, one moment at a time, knowing that, I've had the conversation about end of life quite a few times, with my son, I have a friend who is also a death doula. So it's good to have somebody that you can talk openly about that. I have also a palliative care doctor with who I check in regularly and to see where I'm at. With my oncologist also, it's like, I know we talk about the steps, like, okay, you have pneumonitis, so we have to do this and do that. So we have a steps for the next couple of months. But from time to time, I ask her, can we take a step back and how am I doing in general? Like, where am I at? If I was stopping all medication right now, what do you see happening? Kind of the prognosis question without really asking it and knowing that she cannot give a clear answer. But for me, I navigate things much better when I have the real facts, the reality.
Yes.
I know there are times, like, for whatever reason, this weekend, the fatigue hit me hard. And so yesterday afternoon, I watched one of the most stupid movie to just disconnect, a movie that doesn't require any brain cell to work, really. So from time to time is that, stupid series on Netflix.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Going out, breathing some fresh air and taking it one day at a time.
That's excellent advice. And I love that idea of, having a plan, knowing that the plan can change, and then also asking your team to say, hey, we need to take a step back, or the 30,000-foot view of, okay, let's just put everything on the table so we can make informed decisions based on how I'm feeling as a whole person, not just how the cancer is doing or how the fatigue is doing or the symptom.
Like when I go to my oncologist, I always go with my list of questions. But whatever comes up in that meeting that is new, I don't always think immediately of the question to ask. So I know that because usually I know in advance what my next line of treatment could be. So right now, after Enhertu and capecitabine, I don't know. The only thing I had been told at some point is just more general chemos, and we know that they're going to last, shorter time and less efficient. But I remember at some point we had a conversation that if my cancer is stable, we could go back to a more targeted treatment and get a rest from chemo. So our last meeting with my oncologist, I was telling her that and said, is that still true? And she says, yes, if your cancer is really stable for a while, we can go back there. And at that moment, I grabbed onto those words. That was hope that, yes, we could slow down from chemo. But then since then, I've been thinking, being really stable for a while, I've never been really stable for a while. So my next question that's already on my list for next appointment is, so what now if I'm not stable?
Right. And what is a while? How are we defining that? Is that 3 months or 6 consecutive months or
Right.
9 months? Yeah. Exactly. Annick, this has been a powerful, eye-opening conversation. I really appreciate you literally outlining your entire experience and story from diagnosis to how you've made these decisions, how you've found, a care team that is partnering with you in your care, and perspective of balancing fear and hope, I think is really I feel like I've been quiet on this podcast, which is not like me, but just absorbing and taking everything in that you've been sharing with all of us. It's really beautiful way that you are letting our listeners know, yes, you're living with metastatic de novo breast cancer. Here's a lot of things that you have gone through, and that our listeners are not alone when they're going through this.
And thank you for having those conversations and for focusing more on MBC alone, because sometimes it's hard to be around, earlier stages. You don't want to be the black cloud or...
No, and I don't know why people keep saying that. It's true, and we don't, but at the same time, it's education. And if we, a lot of the programs that we do at survivingbreastcancer.org are for all stages. While there are some specific to MBC, it's important that we have these conversations and get people in clinical trials, that we get people to understand that there is a risk of recurrence. And, even if you're not diagnosed with breast cancer, to know what symptoms are, to be screened and to know your family history and to not miss mammograms, because unfortunately, this disease keeps showing up in the world. Thank you so much for your time, Annick.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to our show. I would like to acknowledge that all of the information on our podcast is from personal experiences and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. You should always contact your medical care team. If you are looking for specific topics or would like to be a guest on our show, please feel free to reach out. My email is laura@survivingbreastcancer.org. Our show is made possible by our nonprofit, survivingbreastcancer.org, and by our incredible donors like yourself. You can hop on over to survivingbreastcancer.org to sign up for our mailing list, make a donation, and explore the 400 plus programs we offer each year at survivingbreastcancer.org/events. Until next time, keep on thriving.